Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This is Deborah Tavares on the Pure Momentum Network with Stop the Crime. Our website is stopthecrime.net. We have Al Whitney with the Anti-Corruption Society as our co-host today. We're going to cover many things, but the most important we have uncovered is our reality of if we continue to comply, we're really all going to suffer consequences. And the consequences, as we see it, are life-threatening. And it's absolutely time to say no. And we're not advocating that people are belligerent or start any type of unlawful resistance. We're talking about non-consenting through a paper non-consent. This is a revolution, a paper revolution. And what Al and I are going to talk about today is why we can absolutely no longer accept the government corporations. They are absolutely posing as legitimate governments. They are not, and they do not work for us. And I think many of you that are listening are starting to get that idea. USA Inc. is nothing but a maze of corporations, all doing business and listed on Dun and Bradstreet for profit and revenue. And their charters are void of acknowledging anything that is alive. And we're alive. And these structures are absolutely set to eliminate all living anything on the face of the planet. So we cannot continue to consent. And we must not consent. So, Al, I'd like to get your comments on that because I know there's a number of points that we're going to go over.
Well, I think a lot of people have a hard time with the fact that they're a corporation. But if you think a little bit about it, a corporation is just a piece of paper in a safe somewhere. It's a charter, bunch of rules on a piece of paper. It's not alive. It's not a living, breathing entity. Can't walk, can't talk. As one guy said, they have no soul to save nor body to incarcerate. And yet we find ourselves in this pickle. We have this dead legal fiction in charge, if we continue down this path, of the living, of the flesh and blood men, women, and children, and birds and squirrels, and trees, and you name it. This is an upside down world, and it's not going to end happily if we don't start admitting that a dead legal fiction cannot be in control of the planet.
Well, that's absolutely true. In fact, Al, I know we have spoken numerous times about the various meetings that we have been attending here in Sonoma County in Northern California, about an hour north of the Golden Gate. We really seem to be on the front lines of how the corporate statutes are being advanced quickly here in Northern California. Corporate statutes, again, those are corporate rules and regulations. They're unlawful, but not under the corporate structure. This is all legal. And this is where people are misunderstanding what our government is. It is not serving us. They are absolutely government officials. They're not government servants or not city servants. They're all employees of the corporation because, Al, what we found out and what you know as well is that our cities are all incorporated and people are largely confused about what that means. When I have, mentioned this to people, they say, well, they're incorporated so that they can have reduced liability, advantages with tax write-offs, etc. But that's not the case.
Well, and the thing is, if you understand what a fiduciary obligation is, that is the rule of their law. The employees who work for the city of, whatever, mine or yours, they have a fiduciary obligation to those who pay them. So they may say they're working in the public's interest, but they can violate your interests without too much difficulty. What they cannot do, the public interest that they're referring to, is the interest of their own corporation. Any of those employees that do harm to their corporation, cost their corporation money or loss, they will be held accountable for that because that is who they serve. They don't serve the public, they serve the corporation. They know that, but somehow they think that they're conditioned to believe that they can serve two masters. But of course, you and I know they can't. They are obligated to their employer.
That's absolutely right. And a specific situation here, many actually, but one that I'll point out right now, is the engineered drought that we're experiencing here in California and have been. We're being told now daily in commercials over the radio that California has experienced and is in the most severe drought in 120 years. And they have a website. It says turnyourwateroff.org and actually turnwateroff.org. And they talk about the new badge of honor is driving in a dirty car. Now they're getting us to accept the idea that dirty cars are a new badge of honor. So what are they doing as far as statutes around this? Well, we're in a stage 2 drought. And the stakeholders, the corporate agencies that are converging upon our cities here in Sonoma County, say that they're basing all of the monitoring requirements and all of the reduction of water use on science. They have weighed in with the U.S. Geological Services. They've weighed in with NASA, with the Scripps Institute, with NOAA. They have leading edge science that is telling us we must reduce our water by 20%. And what they've done, Al, is they've set up snitch teams and code enforcement now. And because the code enforcement staffs here in our cities, as most cities across the country, are understaffed, they're asking the neighbors to report green lawns to the code enforcement. And the code enforcement will come out. They say they're certain that that person is unknowingly using more water than they should. And they'll dangle the carrot in front of them at first and just tell them you're not supposed to irrigate your lawn in a stage 2 drought. In fact, another statute, Al, that they've passed is they've got this cash for grass. They'll give people 50 cents per square foot of grass that they remove, up to $1,000. And we're at the point now that we're facing a stage 3 drought condition because this is all engineered by the global deliberate modification of the Earth's climate. Stage 3 drought will eliminate use of any water on any landscaping. Any new pools will not be allowed to be built. And we cannot even, they say, we cannot plant any vegetables because those would require water. And yet here in Sonoma County, we have miles and miles of vineyards. We have new vineyards being installed. These are high water use crops. The same thing has happened in the Central Valley. And so what we see are these large corporate interests being able to be given the right to use as much water as they want while they're getting ready right now to implement more statutes on reduced water use for all of us. These are all statutes. We must not consent.
There must be some discretionary. Someone said to me that they can make discretionary decisions, and a discretionary decision isn't necessarily in writing. I think we've seen that in building code inspectors. They go to a property, or you have a review board. They look at a property and they make a decision that seems to be based on nothing in paper, nothing in science. They just make these discretionary decisions that their corporation permits them to do, if you've noticed.
Well, actually, I have. A specific instance is a longtime builder here in Santa Rosa, California, decades, and he has a lot that he's wanted to build a house on. He has been turned down within the design review, which is all appointments. These are about 5 appointed design review members that have turned down his plan that meets all the design review code criteria. In fact, it was a split decision, and he lost. One of the design review representatives, board members, said he could not deny him the right for the approval because he met all the current design review codes, and yet he was denied the ability to build his home on his lot that's sitting vacant right now. He's paying property taxes. It's now going to push him into, if he's able to even pull permits in this season of 2014, he's going to end up, maybe if they let it rain, being caught in a rainy season that will preclude his ability to be able to build and hit the market next year during a good marketing time. He's really in trouble.
Well, that when you have these discretionary decisions like this, Deborah, it just opens the door for bribes and corruption. I mean, if there's no written rule that he's violating, and they decide, well, we're just going to deny him this, we don't know for sure that they were bribed, but as long as they have the power to do that, it opens the door for that kind of nefarious activity going on behind the scenes.
Well, we're so corrupt at this point that there is nothing but corruption. There are no level of violations that are acknowledged as anything illegal. In fact, everything that is illegal now is considered legal. We're being rewritten on every level: building codes, climate action requirements now, all illegal. Statutes that they're getting ready to implement by force, by code enforcement on all of our homes to make certain that we comply with the reduction of our greenhouse gas emissions, which is also a lie. Everything is a lie. Everything is being built upon a global hoax, a lie about the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the idea that we must reduce fossil fuel usage. Again, fossil fuel does not come from dead dinosaurs. We have an excellent link about that on stopthecrime.net under the Climate Action Plan link. But what we're talking about is the fact that we have got to identify that we cannot tolerate these government corporations because it's feeding its way into our homes and into our lives on every single level.
Yes, and there's a piece on the Anti-Corruption Society referring to them as the fake government, but and some people say there's a shadow government, which I think there is. I think we pretty much know there's a shadow government that the CIA.
Well, that's without a doubt.
Now, this one isn't a shadow government. What we're talking about with these local corporations, they're very visible. They're very real. You can see them. You can look at them on Dun and Bradstreet. But I think a better word to describe them, Deborah, is a counterfeit government.
Well, Al, you bring up a good point, and I think we need to spend a few sentences on this because people do allude to it as a shadow government. It is not a shadow. It is in plain sight with contracts and grants, and this is being implemented by bookkeeping. We've been told in the Silent Weapons Quiet Wars document that if the bookkeeper can keep the visible bookkeeping methodologies of bookkeeping out of the scrutiny of the public, the bookkeeper can be king. And this is what has happened. We have not been looking at the corporate reality based on bookkeeping and the contracts and all of the grants and signed agreements, because as you know, on stopthecrime.net under the Climate Action Plan link, we have posted contracts that the cities have signed to bring in the required reductions of greenhouse gas emission. And in fact, we've just also posted a YouTube video that is very alarming. We went to a recent meeting speaking about corporate government and how we can't tolerate them. Here for the agriculture, what we now see is that we have corporate agencies and conservation agencies that are also doing business for USA Inc., limiting now the use of greenhouse gas emissions on agriculture. In fact, I was reading a very alarming document that is posted on our site about how they're going to have increased meatless days, and they're going to have to change the global diet in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions that are a problem with agriculture. In fact, at a meeting we just went to, we had a number of people say there needs to be a moratorium on further planting and increasing agricultural lands because they are unsustainable. Lands are considered sprawl, and we have enough food. We're wasting too much food. We don't need any more agricultural lands. In fact, what they said, Al, in the San Joaquin Valley, which has always been known as the breadbasket of California, they say that the reason they're in such trouble and they have no water is because they've planted different crops now that require more water. They used to have many acres of cotton, and now they have orchards and they have planted vineyards.
And vineyards need a lot of water, right?
And much more so than cotton ever did. But it's just a lie to take the water from the San Joaquin Valley to redirect it to the corporate control, because if you control the water, you control the food supply. And what we see here now is a full on-bore assault up on our water use here in Northern California. And this is all part of what is in the requirements to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, in that in order to lower our greenhouse gas emissions, they're saying we must use less resources, and that includes water, that includes electricity. And in the climate action plans, they're eliminating the use of gas, now be it incrementally, but they're saying that we are to no longer use gas appliances or gas devices. Now, I've talked to Southern California Edison and also Pacific Gas and Electric. Those are our utility suppliers here in California, a couple of them. And they are not aware, the employees are unaware that they're reducing any gas because, of course, PG&E, the G is for gas. But they've seen the plans. And so they're scratching their heads right now, wondering what is going on with the requirement to eliminate gas when they certainly provide a gas element in their usage of utilities. But this is incremental. They're moving us into greater and greater restrictions of resources, including water. And this is why the corporation, the structure must be stopped, and we must not give our consent, because there's no end. As we've spoken about many times, Al, there's no end to the harm that these statutes are going to cause. They're literally reshaping our lives globally. This is a global assault.
Well, if you look at that article, people take an opportunity to go to the Anti-Corruption Society and look at the article that says we can no longer tolerate government corporations to combat the fact that these employees of these municipal, or all of these corporations, really regional, municipal, private, they are completely brainwashed into thinking they represent the people. So what we've put down is 14 items, a list of 14 items that can be used by anyone. Any one of these items can demonstrate that this is a fraud, this is a counterfeit. When you look at their behavior, they can say we represent the people, but then you look at these 14 items, which includes, they have somewhat secret CAFR accounts, which is their rainy day funds, and the people are never told how that money is to be spent. But in my municipality, they've got $14 million in that account.
Now, what's important for people to know right here, Al, is, of course, I went to my city and asked them to give me a printout of their CAFR account, what was budgeted. They acted like they did not know what I was talking about. And by the way, CAFR account stands for Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. But they acted like they didn't know what I was talking about. And I asked the director of finance in our town, and I was told there are no rainy day accounts. Everything is listed on the website.
Well, it's possible. I haven't looked at the statutes of your municipality or your state. My municipality admits they have a rainy day fund, a CAFR account. They openly admit it, but then they say they're not sure how much is in it. So, they're semi-transparent. I guess they feel that we can find it, so maybe they better admit it's there. But that's only one of our 14 points. Let me go through the others pretty quickly and let people know you got 14 legitimate points that demonstrate they do not work for us. Number 2, they can decide their own salaries. Number 3, they have an unlimited ability to create rules, fines, and fees. And we've just exposed these rules don't necessarily have to be down on paper, and they can be discretionary. Number 4, they can accept political agenda grants, which are known as bribe, without the public voting on these grants. Number 5, eminent domain. They can take property and claim it's for the best interest of the public, and then they can allow their friends to build a hotel on that property should they choose to do so. Number 6, they have the 2-minute rule. They allow you to attend their meetings, but you are limited in what you can say, and they discourage at all costs questions. They don't want to answer a question in public that would reveal what they're doing. If you're going to call them in private, they'll talk to you, but they don't want everyone in the room to know that your question was legitimate and they can't defend what they're doing.
Now, I would like to make a comment on number 6, the 2-minute or 3-minute rule. In other words, the illusion of the allowable public comment at meetings, because you and I spoke about this recently.
Right.
I did attend a meeting, and during my 3-minute time, I was explaining to everyone that was there that the city council that was sitting before them right then, as I gestured across and indicated the city council, I said, they're all employees of the incorporated city of Santa Rosa, and they're not doing business for you. They are they work for the corporation. And I said, this is evidenced by the fact that I have the corporate meeting statutes, only the allowance of being able to speak, and it's not reciprocal. In other words, they won't answer your questions. I said, this is not a public town hall meeting where they're concerned about what you say, because they're not. It's a requirement that they create the illusion of a public dialogue to keep this whole hoax moving forward, to let us believe that we have a legitimate government representing us, and we don't. And what was alarming was they say in their public meeting description that the city council will not respond to your questions, and they won't give a positive slant or a negative slant on whatever the public says.
Well, and a friend of mine reminded me that when you ask a difficult question at one of their meetings, you are striking a match, okay? If they answered that question, that little match that you're striking, which is just you and them, if they answered it and gave an honest answer, instead of having just you upset this little match, they could have a huge fire, a bonfire, where everyone in the room could listen to this answer, and all of a sudden they don't have just a little hot match, they've got a big bonfire. Well, so they won't answer these questions in public. They make you call and they'll give you their spin in private.
Well, that's my point, because when I was recently at a meeting and I was disclosing the fact that it's not a reciprocal dialogue, after I finished my comments, the mayor said, this is not correct. You can talk to us at any time. You can call us on the phone. Right. We do have a reciprocal dialogue. But I know that we're coming up on a break, and we'll pick this up after the break. Thank you for listening. This is Deborah Tavares on Pure Momentum Network, Stop the Crime, and stopthecrime.net. And we'll continue through our list on the other side of the break. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Sophia Smallstorm inviting you to listen and share with me on Pure Momentum Network, my show called Speed of Light. We are way too bogged down by darkness, heavy energy, and a sense of futility. We need to move into literally a new kind of momentum. Knowledge is one way to do this, and with knowledge comes freedom from the oppressive state of knowing nothing, which some people think is actually bliss. In my journey, exploring so many subjects and expanding my awareness of all that's going on, I have met amazing, wonderful, fascinating people. These are the people, researchers, many of them, that I want you to meet. They have taught me how to really see, and we have exchanged those ways of seeing together. I think this is really about coming together, how we come together in knowing each other and giving our friendship and support. Pure Momentum is a very different opportunity for me. It's just an inner feeling I have, and I'd like you to be a part of it.
An amount necessary or sufficient to have a significant effect or to achieve a result. This is critical mass.
Greetings, fellow organic beings on planet Earth. My name is Pamela Tartar. I host Critical Mass on Pure Momentum Network. My awareness tells me humanity is reaching a tipping point. A choice must be made. Either we choose continuing under ever-worsening tyranny, or we stand up in our humanity and create a new world of love, abundance, compassion, empathy, and all the human attributes and features. I invite you to join me as we explore who we are and find tools inside us, enabling us to stand tall and strong against the opposition. Now is the time. Pamela Tartar, Critical Mass.
Well, thank you for rejoining us here on the Pure Momentum Network. Again, this is Deborah Tavares and my co-host, Anita Whitney. And I can say to you, we were starting, and we still are, going through a list. So, Anita, why don't you pick it up? We were on item number 6, and we had just finished talking about the illusion of having a public dialogue at city, county, school board meetings. It's all an illusion, and how they keep trying to continue that illusion that there is a public dialogue. And I know we have additional points to make after item 6.
Yeah, this is a list demonstrating that they do not work for us, these local governments, these regional planners. They are a counterfeit government. They give us lip service to believe they do not work, that they do work for us when they don't. And we've got a list of 14 items that any one of us can document that proves they do not work for us. Number 7, they engage in sellout. I call it sellout contracts. An example that we used was a municipality in Indiana where the mayor signed an agreement with the city of Chicago to accept garbage and create a landfill right there in this community. Entered into this contract, signed this legally binding contract, and of course, he could do that unilaterally because apparently the corporate charter allowed him to do that. When the public saw these trucks coming in with all the garbage and they complained, they hired their own attorneys who looked at this contract and said that it could not be broken. So obviously that's not a representative government. Number 8, they hire their own propagandists. They call it public relations people. But the ones that I've had contact with all have their own propagandists, and anything that goes out into the press, trust me, is controlled. They create spin to conceal what they're really doing to make it always sound like they care about the community. Number 9, they get free legal.
I would like to just make a quick comment on number 10, just to give it a little more color, because we were talking about how they have their own propagandist. What we have seen too at our meetings that we're going to is they hire consultants. In the instance of Northern California here, where they're rewriting their general plan, they've hired professional consultants out of the area. They're paying them hundreds of thousands of dollars. They've created all these beautiful colored brochures. They're selling the public on the idea that they can weigh in on creating their revised general plan. Now, this is happening across the country right now. and you can contact your building department and find out if they're working on their general plan at this moment. Many cities are. And what we're finding with these propagandists is that they are giving the illusion that you, again, can weigh in, but you cannot. These are all Delphi meetings where you're manipulated and you're swayed and you're directed into plans on every level.
And I bet it looks just like, and people have seen this, it looks just like any corporation creating a presentation to sell a product. I mean, there's no distinction between the two. They hire these companies, and the companies could come out and work for your municipality, or it could work for a private corporation. The same strategy is used for both. It is a sales pitch.
That's exactly right. And we're seeing it at every single meeting. Yep. So what I would recommend, I know we're going to continue to go through the list here in a moment, but what I would really recommend is for those of you that are listening and you're able to attend any kind of a meeting, school board, water meetings, particularly water meetings, because they're really trying to reduce all of our access to water. Even if you're in areas that are being hard hit by increased water levels, et cetera, they're still trying to decrease our water consumption. I would recommend you go to some of these meetings and just observe after you've done a little bit of research on our website, stopthecrime.net, and the Anti-Corruption Society. And just observe, and you'll see for yourselves that what Al and I are talking about is real. They do not acknowledge us as being alive. And I know this was a difficult concept for many people initially to understand, Al, and I think that's why we are in such a dangerous predatory system, because people are not recognizing that. But let's continue with the list. I think we were just finishing up with item number 8.
Okay. They get free legal counsel. You don't get free legal counsel, Deborah. I don't get free legal counsel. But their corporation all has, if they don't have their own attorney who works for their city or their county, then they have the access to legal counsel anytime they wish to help eliminate any liability that someone could try to lay at their feet. They use the Delphi technique of manipulation. They've all been trained in the Delphi technique. They have, in fact, nonprofits actually get training in that same strategy, which was created from the Rand Corporation, and it is a way of manipulating the people who are attendees at a meeting to the point where they end up, the attendees feel confused, but the facilitators feel that they achieved their goal because they managed to inform the public and get input from the public before they proceed regarding their policies or whatever. But it's all manipulation, and they know it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is we're attending many meetings here now in Northern California, as anyone else can that's listening. And I'll just give you some examples of what a Delphi meeting looks like when you walk in. There are generally easels around the perimeter of the room, and oftentimes they'll have multiple tables, and you'll just sit at a table. I've seen, for example, here recently, we had about 10 tables set up with about 8 people to be seated at each of the 10 tables. They'll have, they're set up like little workstations, and you're being given little games to write down your input, but they'll ask you the question. In other words, it's not a public meeting. They're asking the question, and you're frustrated because, wait a minute, suddenly you're not able to ask any questions. And what they have sitting at each table is someone that's trained in the manipulation scheme. And they work at the table to try to keep the uninformed, manipulated public continuing to do what they're told, despite the fact that they may have questions that are outside of the scope of what they're being asked to do. And an example was we were given colored felt pens, and we were told to write on a plan of our city that showed a perimeter around our city that represented the city boundary. And inside that boundary, we were supposed to indicate where we wanted multi-use high-density properties, where we wanted to see parks, where we wanted to see bike paths, and where we wanted to see open space. Now, this was called a visioning meeting. And what was interesting when we were working on our plan, we were talking about, well, here we'd like to see open space. And somebody sitting at the table said, well, wait a minute, my house is there. And we'd say, well, that's okay. We don't care about your house being there. This is a visioning meeting, and we'll just condemn your house at some point. But this is where we'd like to see open space. And the guy's kind of scratching his head and kind of starting to laugh and thinking, this is just a joke. This was happening at all 8 tables. They were designing a vision for the city. And this is a game. This is just a game.
Yes. And it's their vision, not yours, right?
Absolutely. So I'm just trying to illustrate what these meetings look like. So you will go in and have a picture in your mind of this description. Now, we will be filming such a meeting and getting it up on stopthecrime.net. And that should be up probably in about a week. So you can see firsthand what these visioning meetings are about. And heaven help you if you should try to ask a question outside of what the facilitator is wanting to do. They'll say, oh, I'm sorry, no questions now. You can ask your question at the end of the meeting, or you can write it on a Post-it note, or you can send us your question online. It's shutting down all dialogue. You're totally manipulated, and they're playing games with us. They're playing life and death games with us, and we must not consent. This is extremely dangerous.
Well, and we need to get to that threshold point before we finish today, so people understand where that threshold point is. But going on, absolutely. Many people are unaware that the city manager and other city employees adopt policies independent of the elected city council. Now, that goes back to the corporate charter. In my municipality, they recently redid the corporate charter, which is setting up their own rules, how they run their corporation, giving the authority, whatever they choose to do. All they have to do is comply with the state statutes on municipalities. And if they stay within that structure, they can do anything they want. Not at the table, however, when they redid their charter, were the people who call my town their home. We were not invited to that discussion on their corporate charter. None of us even knew it was taking place. I found out by accident. So they're creating their own government, which is a corporate charter, without any input from us, and setting their own rules. And then they turn around and they inflict these rules upon us as if they work for us, when in fact they work for their own corporate charter.
Now, let's give an example of what that would look like so that people that are hearing this can really see an on-the-ground example of how they inflict these rules and regulations on us through their charters.
Well, they can give an authority. In my municipality, they give authority to the city manager to function separately from the city council. And they describe the roles and the functions and the authority that the city manager, the city engineer, the city director of development, all of these people, their jobs are defined separate from the elected officials that we call city council. So city council may or may not have the authority to interfere in the functioning of the corporation called the city of. And that can play out in any number of ways. A good example would be when the mayor of that Indiana city decided to sign a contract, and this has happened across the country where mayors have done this, to permit a landfill within the city limits. Now, if they wrote their charter that would allow him to enter into contracts without any authority from the elected city council, then he hasn't violated any of their statutes, has he? So if you can write the rules, if you can write your own rules, how you function in your job, and call what you put down in that paper legal, then you can legalize theft, which is what they've done.
And they have. The degree of corruption, the degree of theft, and the degree of this organized crime under the illusion of a representative government is all based on corporate charters, on the corporate structure that is literally consuming us. Now, there are several other points we need to make before the top of the hour. I know that we'll continue this conversation for those that subscribe on the Pure Momentum Network, but I'd like us to get through these, and then we're going to get into the ways in which we must no longer consent in the subscriber portion of this time. So now we're on to no liability for harm or loss of their policies either.
Well, okay. Before we go that, Deborah, I'd like to insert one thought here for people because they're going to start to see a pattern of parasitism as we go through this. And I know you've mentioned many times, it's on your website, it's on my website. It's a critically important document called Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. What Deborah and I are describing was actually part of that document. They actually admitted that this was their plan. On page 40, I'm going to read you a short paragraph. Quote, thus a nation becomes divided by two very distinct parts. A docile sub-nation, which is the great silent majority, which is me and you, and a political sub-nation. The political sub-nation, which is the corporate government and its employees, remains attached to the docile sub-nation, which is the public, tolerates it and leeches its substance until it grows strong enough to detach itself and then devour its parent. We are now in that stage where they are devouring the taxpayer and the general population. The corporate governments are getting bigger and stronger, and the people are losing rights. They're losing control of their life. They're losing control of their land. Now, Deborah is pointing out they're losing control of their access to water. This is what you call devouring their parent.
Well, I want to inject at this point, too, because we've certainly been warned, even by John F. Kennedy only 10 days before he was assassinated, where he told us that we were opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relied on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration, which is the corporate agencies, instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. He told us that it's a system that has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. And I would say that pretty well covers what this corporate structure has now entangled itself in, and absolutely describes what you just said, Al. What
Yes.
the Silent Weapons document tells us about, that as soon as they gain enough strength, they then can devour us. And that's where we are now.
That's where we
have. Yeah, we have not understood the system, and we have allowed a system to run amok. We have been paying for it as taxpayers, and we have essentially been agreeing because we have not resisted, because we have been educated into an entrapment of ignorance that has not allowed us to see reality intentionally.
And they actually, it's going to be difficult to engage them because, as Deborah's found out, as I have found out, I have attempted to engage with them as my husband has. They believe the mind control that they were fed. They do not understand yet that they're doing anything wrong. So if you get an opportunity to send this article to anyone you know who works for any of these governmental agencies or city corporations. I encourage you to do so. Perhaps if they saw the list of 15 items, 14 to 15 items, and actually gave it a little bit of thought, they would see what they are engaged in. We have to put an end. I mean, I'd love to see a moratorium on new rules, regulations, and statutes and ordinances. As soon as we get it stopped, we can start to unravel it, but it doesn't seem to look like they want to stop it anytime soon.
Well, that's true. In fact, what they actually do want to do is put a moratorium on water usage, put a moratorium on land use,
energy,
and energy, every aspect of our ability to function as live humans. And they want to put a moratorium on agriculture and rural properties. That's why watching the YouTube video Torn from the Land is critical. It will really define what they're doing to the farmers and ranchers. And it's a full-on assault. And it has been, but it has really increased now with these climate action plans. So I know that we want to cover the next item, which is no liability for harm and loss.
Right. They have, not only do they have no liability, they are protected, they believe. They've got immunity, they believe, because they're a government. And they have no remorse that for the harm that their policies cause. I know that sounds harsh, but Deborah's seen it in action, and so have I. It's the separation. They're on one side of the threshold, and we could call it a threshold or we could call it a fence. But they are on one side. They sit there in a room and they make a rule or a regulation or a decision, okay? Then either their law enforcement, their code enforcement, someone goes out to the public and attempts to enforce this rule or code or regulation. The individuals who passed that never are really witness to the individuals on the other side of the fence, which would be me and you. So they're kept separate, which is unfortunate. It reminds me of, pilots in a plane when they drop bombs, they can't see what happens to their victims. It's similar in the sense that they can write rules and prohibit you from making a living, but they're never going to actually come face to face with you as you slip into poverty. So there's no connection to them between their rulemaking and your loss or harm.
That's right. That's right. In fact, Al, I know that we are aware of a situation, for an example, where a city has decided to assess a fine through a statute that they created without any vote from the people, where they're going to send code enforcement out once a year to check all properties that are not shown on the tax rolls as being owner occupied. So what does that mean? That means all properties that are owned and rented out, such as apartment buildings, condominiums, whatever your ownership is. If you are not specified as an owner occupant, you're going to have the code enforcement do a visual drive-by on an annual basis and charge you a rather hefty fee to confirm that your grass is being mowed and that you have no derelict vehicles in your driveway. And this is massively going to affect certainly multifamily property owners with apartments. It's going to massively affect their income.
Yes, and consequently, depending on what their overhead is, Deborah, if they haven't got a wide amount of profit coming from this property, this could also impact what the tenants are going to have to pay when their annual lease is up. So what this does, this gets passed on to the hardworking business owner and the hardworking individual who's just trying to rent a place to live.
Well, that's exactly true. In fact, in my research regarding the climate action plans, I discovered out of New York that a group of attorneys have been working with attorneys on the West Coast here in California. And they're excited about all of the new green environmental types of litigation that are going to start occurring. They see a whole new business model for bringing us into these illegal courts now, being coming out of the requirements to go green. This is a new green economy that they're trying to replace our economy that was working rather well up to a limited period of time. But they're really literally collapsing the United States and transitioning us into an economy that is based upon service jobs and on people that are going to force all of these new codes and statutes on everybody else.
Many people describe this as a race to the bottom.
That's a perfect description. It is an absolute race to the bottom.
Right. And they call it global competition. They want us to be globally competitive. And I've heard speeches given at the regional planners saying, well, we want Central Ohio to be globally competitive. And, I look around the room and I'm thinking, do any of you understand that in a global marketplace, the cheapest labor cost is where they're going? They're going for slave labor. That is what they call globally competitive.
Well, we are fast becoming competitive on a global slave labor basis because of our prison system. And they're certainly now taking advantage of the increased prison population as a result of not conceding, following along with all of these statutes. So we see that. Now we have one more item to cover, and I know we're nearing the top of the hour, and it's about outsourcing of jobs. So we need to cover that, and then we're going to get into more detail in the subscriber section.
And in the subscriber section, we're also going to talk about the possibility of what we can do. We have a legal notice that we can talk about. Okay, outsourcing of jobs. Well, that has happened here in my state. It has happened in my municipality, where in my municipality, we had a garbage service, and we liked the garbage service. They were great. They were local people. The city had the service. We got to even know who the garbage people were, and it was really ideal. In fact, if you forgot to put your garbage out, you could call them and they'd come back and get it. It was wonderful. Well, then the city decided, well, we're going to contract. We found out we can save money for the city. That's the kicker, Deborah, that I found out. They save money for the city by selling all their garbage trucks and firing all their workers. And then they outsourced it to a private corporation from out of state. Now, we could save money, they say, but you look at them and you say, who saved money? And Deborah, who saved money was the city corporation. Did our taxes go down? No.
Did your garbage rates go down?
No. Did our service improve? No. Did we benefit at all? No. We paid a higher cost for worse service. But the city corporation increased its profit and bottom line. And that's another game they play. They play the game, if it's good for the city of, it's good for you.
Well,
that's true.
We just experienced a similar situation. There are actually many situations, but here's one that occurred here in Northern California. They have, as part of the city departments, or they did, I should say, a revenue collection department where they would collect on traffic tickets, they would collect fees on local business license fees, etc. And recently I discovered that they've outsourced that department to an out-of-state corporation. And these employees are all going to be losing their jobs.
Right.
This department is downsizing. Again, the same example, Al, of the garbage collection service in your city. We're now seeing that now with revenue collection agencies. In fact, I would go as far as to say that those of you that are listening, check to find out what kinds of transitions are happening in your city right now. Call and ask, is your revenue collection department being outsourced to another state? This is everything about not going local and shifting and literally collapsing our local structure. Now we're at the top of the hour, Al. This is the conclusion of this hour's program on the Pure Momentum Network. This is Deborah Tavares with StopTheCrime.net and Al Whitney with the Anti-Corruption Society. We're now going into the subscribers section of the Pure Momentum Network, and we encourage everyone to subscribe. We would also encourage that you certainly pass this information on to everyone that is concerned. Everyone should be concerned. So we would welcome more listeners. This is how this network continues to promote the kinds of conversations and programming that you're hearing right now. So we're going to now lead into the subscribers section. So please join us on the Pure Momentum Network.
We invite all our listeners to join us in the members section for the second hour of all our shows. We encourage you to click on the subscribe button, choose a membership type, pay with PayPal, and voila, you're a member. Enjoy all Pure Momentum Network material, the second hour of all talk shows, extra interviews, and all